There was no sound, and then there was all sound. A scream that was also a color, a tear in the fabric of existence. The endless black sheet of space stable for an eon ripped open. It did not tear neatly. It fractured like diseased glass, a spiderweb of non-light spreading from a central howling wound. A gangrenous bile-green luminescence spilled forth a sickness pouring from a reality that should not be. From this impossible light, whispers slithered, coiling into the void, promises of power, threats of damnation, the incoherent cackling laughter of mad gods. The wound pulsed a septic heart in the emptiness. Drifting nearby, caught in the sudden violent currents of this unsea, was a derelict. A vast floating tomb of fused ships, a space hulk, as the mortals of this new reality would name it. Its silence was a stark contrast to the vortex's scream. The vortex convulsed, and then vomited. A thing of metal vast and rusted was hurled from the emerald madness. It was not a ship. It was a sarcophagus of brass and iron, a pressurized suit of impossible proportions, built for pressures that could crush mountains. It tumbled end over end, a low mechanical screech echoing in the vacuum as its joints forged for the crushing depths of an ocean, long dead protested the absolute cold. It crashed. The impact was a silent explosion of force metal striking metal. The object-subject atlas embedded itself deep into the pock-marked frozen deck of the space hulk. Sparks deadened by the lack of air showered from the impact crater. For a long, stunned second, the massive riveted diving suit lay still, a piece of flotsam from a dead world now shipwrecked on a new one. Then a light. A single sickly yellow porthole on the armored helmet flickered, sputtered against the alien physics and held. A second light joined it. A low, mournful groan, half-beast, half-machine, vibrated through the hull of the hulk itself. The thing pushed itself up, its great limbs grinding as plating scraped against plating. It was enormous, a walking tank, designed by a madman, its brass alloy skin pitted and stained with the rust of ages. Its movements were heavy, ponderous, yet possessed an undeniable, terrifying purpose. Subject Atlas rose to its full height, the yellow lights of its helmet cutting twin cones through the swirling alien mists that clung to the hulk's surface, mists that seemed to crawl from the open warp rift. Atlas surveyed the wreckage for barely a second. Its head, encased in the thick brass, snapped back toward the crater it had made. It was not alone. The giant machine moved its heavy boots clanging on the deck, shoving aside a twisted girder with effortless strength. There, huddled against the cold, dead metal, was a small shape. A girl, Ilara. No older than 8, dressed in simple rags that seemed tragically out of place. She was trembling, her small hands covering her face, her knuckles white. She was not breathing the vacuum. A thin, shimmering aura, almost invisible, pulsed around her, a fragile bubble of life gifted by her protector. The giant machine moved with a sudden, shocking gentleness. It stepped forward, positioning its vast, armored body between the girl and the gaping wound of the warp. It was an instinctive, absolute defense. The bond forged in a reality now lost reasserted itself instantly. It was the protector. She was the protected. The hulk was not dead. It was merely waiting. The sound of the crash, the psychic stench of new life, had drawn its inhabitants. A chittering sound echoed from a dark, gaping corridor. A wet, clicking growl, the sound of predators stirring. Atlas's head snapped towards the noise. Its yellow porthole lights shifted instantly to a burning, angry red. It raised its left arm, a colossal, conical drill that whirred to life its internal motor, rising to a menacing metallic whine. In its right hand, a heavy rivet gun designed to patch hulls deep underwater, now aimed as a weapon of war. They came. Pale, multi-limbed horrors, all slick chitin claws and fangs. Genestealers, the vanguard of a greater hunger. They poured from the shadows, their movements impossibly fast. They saw the metal giant as an obstacle, the small child as prey. The first one leaped a blur of white and purple. Atlas did not dodge. It met the charge, its drill screaming. The sound was obscene metal, tearing through Xenos chitin acidic blood, spraying against the brass armor, sizzling on contact. Atlas roared its mechanical challenge, a sound of pressurized steam and agonizing loss. It slammed the rivet gun forward, firing a white-hot spike that nailed a second creature to the bulkhead. This was not a soldier's fight. It was a slaughter. Atlas was a brute, a battering ram. It didn't care about tactics, only about the 3-foot perimeter around Alara. It swung its drill in a wide arc, pulverizing a third attacker, then backhanded a fourth with its armored fist, shattering its alien skull. The red lights of its helmet were a beacon of pure, focused rage. It fought to keep them away, not to win a war. The violence had a cost. The brutal impacts, the spray of alien blood on ancient control panels, had triggered the Hulk's last dying defenses. A klaxon ancient and hoarse began to blare its sound, a painful vibration in the metal deck. Warning lights, red and desperate, flashed across the ruined bridge. A synthesized voice, crackling with millennia of decay, began a countdown in a language long dead. Self-destruction. The ship was purging itself. There was nowhere to go. The warp rift was a closing septic eye. The Hulk was tearing itself apart. The Genestealers paused, confused by the new threat, before retreating into the shadows. Atlas wasted no time. Its logic was simple. Protect Alara. It turned its massive boots clanging and grabbed the girl, pulling her against its armored chest. Its internal mechanisms whirred as it scanned for any exit. It found one. A row of escape pods, rusted and forgotten. Most were just empty coffins, their doors welded shut by time. One showed a single flickering green light. Atlas charged, smashing through a collapsing bulkhead as if it were paper. It tore the damaged hatch from the pod, threw Alara into the cramped interior, and squeezed its own impossible bulk inside the metal of the pod, groaning in protest. Atlas sealed the door, just as the first explosion rocked the Hulk. With a dying shudder, the Space Hulk's systems launched the pod. It was fired blindly, a metal seed spat into the void. Behind them, the Hulk blossomed into a silent, white-hot flower of destruction, the blast momentarily silencing the warp rift. The pod, battered and failing, tumbled through space, its navigation systems dead. But its trajectory was already set, captured by the immense gravity of the only world nearby. Through the pod's cracked viewport, Alara, held safely in the giant's lap, could see it. A single diseased orb hanging in the black. A world of grey-brown clouds, suffocating pollution, and the faint pinprick lights of unimaginable vertical cities. Hive World Sedon 4. The fall was a symphony of screaming metal. The escape pod, never designed for atmospheric entry, became a meteor. It punched through the perpetual brown-grey clouds of Sidon Fash, its hull glowing a dull, angry red. It hurtled past the spires of the upper hive, cathedral-sized structures that clawed at a sky they would never reach. It plunged past the manufactorum levels, vast zones of automated industry where the air was thick with soot. Down, down, down it fell, a forgotten prayer, plummeting into the dark. It tore through a reinforced plasteel floor, the impact shattering its own viewport, and continued its descent, finally smashing through the corroded ancient foundations of the city itself. The final impact was a wet, thunderous crunch. The pod, a mangled coffin of iron, came to rest in a sea of filth, half submerged in a vast, dark expanse of chemical sludge and centuries of industrial refuse. The sump. The lowest, most forgotten level of the hive city, a pneumatic hiss, a groan of tortured metal, and one side of the pod was torn away. Subject Atlas emerged, its brass form caked in rust and slime. The air was a poisonous soup, a miasma of chemical fumes, human waste, and decay that would kill a normal human in minutes. But the air around Atlas shimmered, a faint, localized energy field projecting from its suit, creating a fragile pocket of barely breathable atmosphere. This was the gift it gave to its charge. Atlas turned its red light portholes, cutting through the near-total darkness, and reached back into the wreckage. It pulled Alara out, cradling her small form. The girl was coughing, her eyes wide with terror, but alive. Atlas set her down on a rare patch of solid ground, a mound of compacted refuse and rusted girders. Alara stared at their new world. This was not rapture. This was a nightmare of industry, a city built on the bones of 1,000,000 other cities, stretching up into an unseen artificial sky. Giant corroded pipes, some as wide as buildings, crisscrossed the darkness above, weeping viscous black tears into the stagnant water. The distant rhythmic thud of machinery, thousands of levels above, vibrated through their very bones. The slog, a toxic green-black ocean, lapped at the edges of their island of trash. It was a cathedral of decay, a rapture that had truly finally collapsed under the weight of its own ambition and left to rot for millennia. Atlas, unfazed, stood its ground, its head slowly panning a mechanical lighthouse in a sea of forgotten despair. They were not alone for long. A wet splash, followed by a low, guttural chuckling. Figures emerged from the gloom. They were barely human, their forms twisted by mutation, toxic environments, and desperate hunger. Their skin was covered in sores, their eyes a milky white. They were scavengers, scavies, the bottom feeders of the sump. They carried crude weapons, jagged pieces of metal, rusted pipes, a single ancient pistol. They saw two things, a mountain of scrap metal ripe for the taking, and a small fresh meal. The leader, a creature with a third vestigial arm, pointed a sharpened rebar at Alara. Meat, it hissed, its voice a wet rasp. And iron. Good haul. They fanned out their movements like those of starving hyenas. This was the first brutal welcome of the Imperium. Atlas did not hesitate. The scavies were not a threat. They were an obstacle. As the first one lunged at Alara, Atlas's arm, the one with the drill, moved in a blur. The sound of the drill spinning to life was louder than the scavies' scream. It was over in a second. Atlas didn't just kill, it disassembled. The scavi leader stared in horror as its companion was reduced to a spray of red mist and tattered rags. Atlas took one heavy step forward. Its rivet gun fired, the thud hiss echoing in the cavernous space. A white-hot spike punched through the pistol wielder's chest, pinning him to a rusted bulkhead. The remaining scavengers, suddenly realizing this was not scrap, but a demon of iron, turned to flee. Atlas was faster. It was a machine of brutal, efficient extermination. It was not angry. It was not hateful. It was simply removing a contamination. It finished the last two with crushing blows from its free hand. In the silence that followed, Atlas returned to Alara's side, its lights fading from crimson back to a watchful, protective yellow. It stood over her, a brass monument in a land of iron, while the girl simply wept. Hours or perhaps days passed in the suffocating darkness, measured only by the cycles of Alara's hunger. The girl was huddled at the base of the metal giant, her stomach a tight knot of pain. She was starving. Atlas stood immobile, its yellow lights a protective beacon, but it sensed the distress. The girl was weakening. A deep, forgotten protocol stirred within its mechanical mind, a directive from a world of ocean and neon. The sister was sick. The sister needed Adam. It scanned the filthy water it's programming, searching for a familiar, glowing signature that did not exist in this reality. A sudden splash drew its attention. A creature, a sumpghast, skittered across a nearby heap of refuse. It was a pale, multi-legged thing of mutated flesh, its eyes milky and blind. Instinct took over. Atlas moved with a speed that defied its bulk. Its drill whirred to life, a sudden, terrifying scream in the quiet. It plunged its arm into the water, and in a spray of black, oily liquid, it impaled the creature. The ghast twitched, dying. Atlas lifted it, the drill mechanism clicking, expecting. Something. A harvest. A resource. Nothing happened. The creature was just meat. A low, frustrated groan rumbled from Atlas's chest vents. It held the dying mutant, its internal logic caught in a loop of failed expectation. This was not Adam. This was not right. The girl was still hungry, and the machine had no solution. It tossed the corpse aside, its red lights flickering in confusion and mechanical agitation. The exertion combined with the earlier crash and subsequent fight was taking its toll. The giant's energy was finite. The brilliant yellow lights in its portholes began to dim, fading to a weak, sputtering orange. Its massive shoulders slumped, the whir of its internal mechanisms slowing to a laborious, struggling hum. It was dying. Elara, weak as she was, saw this. Her only friend, her protector, was shutting down. A new kind of terror, sharper than hunger, seized her. She would be alone in the dark. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. She crawled forward, pushing herself up, and placed her small, trembling hands on the cold brass plating of its leg. Her mind, a strange and untrained thing, reached out. It was not a conscious thought, but a desperate, childish plea. Don't go. Don't leave me. She wasn't just touching metal, she was touching the machine. And in that instant, her mind, a nascent beacon for the powers of the warp, became a conduit. The sump, the air itself, was thick with the raw, unseen energy of this new, hateful universe. Elara, in her fear, unknowingly tapped into it. She became a siphon. A torrent of raw, immaterial energy, chaotic and electric, flowed through her and into the machine. The effect was instantaneous. A violent jolt seized the giant. A high-pitched squeal of supercharged metal echoed through the chamber as power, raw and unfiltered, surged through its dead circuits. The joints snapped taut. The dim orange lights in the helmet exploded in a flash of blinding pure white before settling into a vibrant, steady and intense yellow. The drill on its arm spun once, a sudden, powerful VRE before falling silent. Atlas was recharged, reborn. Elara was thrown back by the surge, landing hard on the trash heap, gasping. She had fed the machine. Subject Atlas stood to its full height, its power core thrumming with a new alien energy. It turned its massive head, the brass helmet tilting as it regarded the small girl on the ground. Its lights were steady, no longer red with anger or orange with failure. They were simply a bright, watchful yellow. A new sound emitted from its vents, not a groan of frustration or a roar of rage, but a deep, resonant rumble. A mechanical purr of contentment. The sister had provided. The bond was complete. Its massive metal hand moved not to attack, but to sift through the pile of refuse it stood upon. Its fingers, capable of crushing plasteel, moved with a strange, searching gentleness. They closed on a small, sodden object. It was a doll, or what remained of one, a bundle of rags with button eyes and yarn hair caked in centuries of filth. Atlas extended its hand and dropped the ruined toy into Elara's lap. A gift. A reward. Their pact was sealed, unspoken, and absolute. It would be her shield, her protector, and she unknowingly would be its battery. They could not stay. The biological residue of the scavies was a beacon in the sump, and Atlas's core programming, now running on the strange, potent fuel Elara provided, demanded movement. Protect the sister. Secure the perimeter. Find a defensible location. It moved through the labyrinthine ruins of the hive, bottom its brass boots sinking deep into the viscous sludge before pulling free with a heavy, sucking schlup. Elara, exhausted and silent, rode perched on its massive shoulder pauldron, her small hands clutching a riveted handhold, the tattered rag doll tucked securely into the front of her shirt. The giant's yellow lights were a comfort, cutting twin cones through the oppressive, humid darkness. They navigated a collapsed transit way, the skeletons of ancient vehicles forming islands in the black, slow-moving water. The attack came with a sudden, violent organization, A series of bright, blinding searchlights snapped on from corroded catwalks far above, pinning them in a cage of glaring white light. "There it is," a harsh voice bellowed, amplified by a crackling vox-hailer. "The big one, pin it flankers, aim for the girl. I want the little witch alive." This was not a random band of starving mutants. This was a true underhive gang, organized, equipped, and predatory. They wore piecemeal mesh armor, scavenged guard flak vests, and gas masks with terrifying insectoid lenses. The air was instantly filled with the deafening crack, crack, crack of autoguns and the heavier thud of stubbers. Bullets, small arms fire, sparked and whined as they ricocheted off Atlas's thick brass hide. The impacts were like angry hornets, useless against its hull, but deafening in their fury. The giant didn't flinch. It immediately set Alara down behind a large, rusted bulkhead, moving its own body to form a mobile fortress between her and the gunfire. Its porthole lights snapped from yellow to a burning, furious crimson. It raised its rivet gun, aimed into the blinding lights, and fired. The thud hiss of the weapon was answered by a wet scream and the sound of a body toppling from the catwalk into the sludge below. But the gangers were prepared. As Atlas raised its arm, a massive weighted cargo net tangled with chains and heavy scrap iron dropped from the darkness above. It fell over the giant's shoulders, the chains rattling as they snagged on its drill and its vents. Atlas roared a sound of pressurized steam and mechanical fury and struggled against the immense weight. More gangers swarmed from side tunnels, whooping and screaming, their confidence bolstered. They fired stub revolvers at its joints, heavy caliber rounds designed to stop rampaging mutants. They threw grappling hooks with heavy cables which snagged on its armored limbs, and 4 men began to pull, trying to unbalance the Colossus. They wanted the machine a prize to be rebuilt as their own personal war engine. Atlas fought with the blind, single-minded brutality of its programming. Threat detected. Proximity to Alara critical. It tore at the net, its free hand ripping the steel links apart. The conical drill on its left arm screamed to life a terrifying, rising whine. It lunged, still partially entangled, and caught one of the grappling hook teams. The drill did not just kill, it disassembled. It reduced the man to a spray of red mist and tattered rags, causing his comrades to drop their cable and flee. Atlas backhanded another ganger with its rivet gun, the impact crushing the man's chest cavity against a steel pillar. But for everyone it killed, 2 more took their place, jabbing with electric lances and makeshift spears, their attacks focused with disciplined malice on its vulnerable joints, the hydraulic pipes between the brass plates. "The leg! Get the leg, you scum!" the leader screamed. He was a brute of a man, his face a mass of scar tissue and cheap augmetics, and he carried a heavy 2-handed hydraulic breaker, a mining tool. As Atlas twisted to fire at a gunman on the catwalk, the leader saw his opening. He lunged, swinging the industrial tool like a war hammer. The pneumatic-driven piston struck the back of Atlas's knee joint. There was a sickening shriek of tortured metal, a geyser of pressurized fluid, and the leg joint buckled. The giant's balance was gone. It stumbled its heavy boot, failing to find purchase in the slick mud. With the sound of a collapsing bell tower, Atlas crashed to the ground, its brass body half submerged in the toxic water. Its drill spun uselessly in the air as its red lights flickered. The gangers roared a ragged, triumphant cry. The Colossus was down. The leader, his respirator voice a gravelly laugh, stomped through the sludge, the hydraulic breaker resting on his shoulder. He ignored the struggling sparking machine and walked straight to the rusted bulkhead where Alara was hiding. "Knew it!" He grunted, his augmented eye whirring as it focused on her. A machine that big needs a master. It's the little witch. He reached down with a grimy, gauntleted hand and seized Alara by the arm, yanking her from her hiding place. She screamed a tiny, frail sound in the vast industrial cavern. He dragged her out, holding her up like a trophy for his men. "See, Tin Man, we got you." He paused, his gaze falling on the tattered doll that had fallen from her shirt. He snatched it, looked at it, then at her, and laughed. No more toys, he spat and threw the doll into the black, oily sludge. Elara stared at the sinking doll, her last link to anything a gift from her only friend. And then she looked at the laughing, scarred face of her tormentor. She saw the struggling form of Atlas, its red lights flashing a desperate, frantic code, trying to drag itself forward with one arm, its drill churning uselessly in the mud. The fear, the hunger, the loss, and the sudden overwhelming rage coalesced into a single point of pressure in her mind. She had no words. She had no weapons. She only had the strange, burning power that had refueled her giant. She opened her mouth. It was not a scream. A scream is sound. This was a psychic detonation. It was the sound of a star being born, compressed into the body of an 8-year-old girl. A shockwave of pure white gold energy, visible even to the naked eye, erupted from her. The world went silent for a single terrible heartbeat. The air pressure plummeted and then reversed, exploding outwards. The gang leader holding her was the first to go. He didn't have time to register his mistake. The psychic fire hit him, and he simply ceased to exist. His flesh, his augmetics, his bones all were reduced to a superheated pink mist that instantly evaporated. The hydraulic breaker he held melted its metal, running like water before turning to steam. The shockwave expanded in a perfect, devastating sphere. The gangers who had been cheering a moment before were caught in the blast. Those closest were liquefied, their bodies slumping into bubbling, unrecognizable piles of organic slurry, their mesh armor dissolving their weapons, turning red-hot, then white-hot, then simply vanishing. Further out, the gangers clutched their heads, blood pouring from their eyes, ears and noses as their brains boiled inside their skulls before they too collapsed. The metal of the catwalks they stood on groaned, heated to plasticity in a microsecond, and began to melt, dripping like liquid fire into the sump. The very sludge recoiled, hissing and vaporizing as the psychic sun passed over it. The entire collapsed transitway was illuminated in a flash of impossible, terrible light, brighter than any arc welder, purer than any star. It was the raw, unbridled power of a human soul unleashed as a weapon. Then silence, a profound, ringing void. The only sounds were the hiss of vaporizing sludge and the drip, drip, drip of molten metal cooling in the water. In the center of a newly blasted crater, Elara stood untouched. The psychic energy had formed a perfect protective bubble around her, and around the fallen form of Subject Atlas. The girl was breathing heavily, her eyes wide, staring at the empty space where the gang leader had been. The intense light faded, leaving her and her protector alone in the sudden echoing darkness. But the echo of that scream did not fade. It was not a sound, but a psychic event, and it traveled. It shot up through the hive, ignoring plasteel concrete and millennia of industry. In the highest spire, the apex, inside the choir chamber of the governor's palace, an astropath. His eyes, long since burned out, jerked in his meditative trance. His scribe servitor recorded his sudden, panicked telepathic whisper. A fire. A new sun. It burns in the dark. Unguided, uncontrolled, deep in a forgotten, sealed-off dome, Malak, the charismatic leader of the Whispering Hand, was in the midst of a ritual. As the scream passed, the sacrificial blood on his altar instantly boiled and turned to ash. His eyes, milky with devotion, snapped open. A slow, ecstatic smile spread across his face. The whispers he had listened to for so long were now a roar. It is here, he breathed, raising his arms to his cackling followers. The vessel, the voice. The gods have sent us the key to our liberation. And in a fortified precinct, a temporary bastion of the holy orders of the Inquisition, a man named Kalen sat in a sparse, functional room. He was reviewing a data slate, a cup of imported bitter recaf by his side. He was not a brute. He was a surgeon, a pragmatist. Affixed to the wall was a null field generator, a silver intricate device that hummed with a subtle, mind-numbing frequency. As Alara's psychic shout echoed through the city, the device overloaded. It gave a shrill, dying whine, and a crystal matrix within it cracked. Kalen didn't flinch. He simply set down his cup. He felt the psychic resonance wash over him, a wave of raw, unfiltered power that tasted of ozone. He stood, his cold, grey eyes unfazed, but his mind instantly calculating. Psyker, he stated to the empty room. Uncontrolled, emergent, level, delta, possibly higher. He walked to his desk and activated a secure vox. Alert my retinue. Contact the local Arbeitsprefect. We have a containment breach. Sector Sump. Find it. Inquisitor Kalen stood in the sterile grey light of the Arbeits command precinct. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt-out circuitry, a gift from the cracked, smoking null field generator in the corner. Kalen, a man whose plain, severe features were unadorned by fanaticism, ignored it. He wore a simple black carapace coat, the silver eye of his office, the only mark of authority. He looked at a flickering hololith of Hive Sidon 4, a three-dimensional scar of a city. A single angry red rune now pulsed in its deepest, most forgotten root, the Sump. The local Arbeitsprefect, a broad man named Vol, whose uniform was dark with nervous sweat, stood at a rigid, terrified attention. My Lord Inquisitor Vol began, his voice too loud. We are tracking a massive energy signature. A generator malfunction in the lower habs, perhaps? We are dispatching a servitor team. Kalen raised one black-gloved hand. The prefect's voice died instantly. It was not a malfunction, Prefect Kalen said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a vivisection blade. It was cold, precise, and held no emotion at all. It was a psychic hemorrhage, an uncontrolled manifestation. What you felt was the birth scream of a cancer. Kalen turned from the map, his grey eyes clinically assessing the trembling officer. A cancer, if left unchecked, that will metastasize. It will draw the attention of things you cannot comprehend. It will become a gateway, and this entire hive will be the sacrifice. He tapped a control on the hololith. The entire Sump sector glowed a bloody, malevolent red. You will mobilize every enforcer at your disposal. You will start a full-scale city-bottom sweep. Cordon every access tunnel. Purge every mutant den. I want that entire level lit up, my lord. The entire Sumpval stammered, his bravado evaporating. We don't have the men. It's a lost zone. It would be a slaughter. We would be feeding our forces into a grinder. Kalen's expression did not change. Your men are a resource, Prefect. This hive is my patient. If I must amputate to save the body, I will. Consider your men the cauterizing tool. I am not asking you to succeed. I am ordering you to apply pressure. A rat, even a psychic one, will flee when its nest is on fire. The Prefect, his face pale, could only nod. Go. I want reports every 15 minutes. Vol scrambled from the room, bellowing orders into his vox. Kalen turned back to the map. The hammer was now swinging. It was time to ready the scalpel. From a shadowed alcove, a separate secure door hissed open. Kalen did not turn. The hammer is falling, he said. 3 figures emerged, their footfalls silent. They were not Arbeits. They were his personal retinue, his hounds. The first, a woman in a slick black sin-skin body glove. Her face a featureless mirrored helm was a null. Her very presence made the air feel thin and empty, a void in the warp. The second was a hulking tech adept, his body a mass of whirring augmetic scanner arrays and manipulator arms. The third was a scarred, grim-faced warrior in heavy, battered carapace armor, carrying a suppression shield and a humming power maul. The Arbeits will be our beaters. Kalen said, his voice now even colder. They will make noise. They will flush the prey. He looked to the null. You will lead. Your void will be our compass in that darkness. To the tech adept you will track. That signature was raw, but focused. I want to know what it is. And to the warrior you will contain. The Arbites will be given purge orders. Ours are different. We are surgeons. This is not an extermination. This is a capture. The scarred warrior nodded. The target inquisitor. Kaelin's gaze drifted back to the red-stained map. An uncontrolled Psyker. Level Delta. Find it. Bring it to me. Far below the Arbite's pounding boots, in a place the sump slime itself had forgotten, the psychic scream was received not as a threat, but as a holy revelation. The chamber was a desecrated water treatment cistern, its walls carved with spiraling, impossible sigils that seemed to hurt the eyes. The air was thick with the copper-sweet tang of blood and the narcotic reek of burning, forbidden incense. This was the sanctum of the Whispering Hand, a cult that had festered in the darkness of Sidon Forth for generations awaiting a sign. At the center of the chamber, his back to a great cracked filter column that now served as an altar, stood Malak. He was a gaunt, serpentine figure, his charisma a palpable coiling force. His skin was unnaturally pale, etched with tattooed prayers that seemed to wriggle in the flickering green-flamed candlelight. He had been in the middle of a sermon, his voice a hypnotic, sibilant whisper, when the psychic detonation had washed over them. The shockwave had been a physical force in this place, so close to its epicenter. The blood on the altar had boiled and evaporated. The tallow candles had been snuffed out, only to reignite with a sick purple light. His followers, a ragged congregation of mutants, heretics, and disillusioned hive dwellers, had fallen to their knees, some weeping, some shrieking in ecstatic terror. Malak himself had been thrown back, his eyes rolling white, as a billion whispered voices flooded his mind. Now he rose. A slow, enraptured smile spread across his face, a look of profound, terrible love. It is the voice he breathed, his voice trembling with adoration. The unchild, the gods have answered. He raised his arms, his tattered robes falling away to reveal a body scarred by ritual. For so long we have listened to the echoes of their promise. Now the promise is here in our very midst, a sword of power, a key to the heavens sent to us to liberate this rotting, faithless city in a baptism of glorious fire. A frenzied cheer erupted from the cultists. They beat their chests, they chanted, they wept, but Malak silenced them with a sharp gesture. The unbeliever hunts it! He hissed his ecstasy, sharpening into a predator's focus. He could feel the new vibrations in the hive, the clumsy thudding boots of the Arbites, a crude, brute force response. And he could feel something else, a cold, precise void, a silence that was in itself a signature. The Inquisitor. They seek to cage the miracle, to drug it, to chain it, to feed it to their corpse god on his golden throne. He pointed a long, bony finger at a cage in the corner of the chamber, where a lesser captured Psyker, a warlock, was whimpering, his eyes wide with the terror of what he too had felt. The heathens have their crude scanners. We will have vision. Malak strode to the cage and tore it open, dragging the wretched Psyker out by his hair. The gods have gifted us a beacon. Malak whispered, his voice now a soothing, venomous coo as he stroked the trembling man's face. And you, my child, you will be the eyes that find it. He pushed the Psyker onto the blood-stained altar. Show us the path. Offer your soul as a sacrifice, and be the first to gaze upon our salvation. The warlock began to scream, but the sound was drowned by the rising, ecstatic chant of the cult. Malak produced a ritual dagger, its edge humming with a faint, dark energy. Find us the voice, he commanded, and plunged the blade down. The wailing chant of the Whispering Hand reached a fever pitch, a prayer of damnation that echoed into the sump, beginning its own separate hunt. The blast zone was a smoking, molten scar in the darkness. Atlas, its damaged leg joint hissing steam, had managed to push itself upright, using its drill as a support. The psychic blast had supercharged its systems, the raw immaterium flowing through its circuits like a drug. But it had also fused the damaged joint into a barely functional locked position. It now moved with a heavy, scraping limp, dragging its left leg as it carried Alara away from the site of her terrible outburst. The girl was limp, her body exhausted, her mind shattered by the horror of what she had done, the lives she had extinguished in a single, terrible thought. She was asleep, or perhaps in shock, her small body cradled in the giant's massive armored hand. Atlas, following its simple driving directive, was searching for a defensible position, a place of water and shadow. It found a junction, a vast, echoing cistern where multiple sewer conduits converged. And there it found the Arbites, a 5-man patrol clad in the black, brutalist carapace armor of the Adeptus Arbites, their visors glowing red in the darkness. They had been drawn by the sounds of the earlier firefight and were now advancing cautiously, their combat shotguns and suppression shields held high. Hold their leader, a man with a booming vox-augmented voice, commanded. "In the name of the Emperor's law, identify yourself. Set the child down, you xenoconstruct." They fanned out their weapons, aimed their discipline absolute. They saw a giant unidentified machine caked in filth and blood, holding a small child. Their orders were simple: purge the sump, secure any anomalies. This was the anomaly. The Arbites officer didn't wait for a reply. "Target is non-compliant. Open fire." Suppressing the cistern exploded with sound. The deafening boom 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 of Arbites pattern combat shotguns echoed off the walls. Heavy solid slugs, each the size of a man's thumb, hammered against Atlas's brass hide. The impacts were staggering, punching dents into the metal, ringing the giant's chassis like a struck bell. Atlas roared, its mechanical voice a blend of a foghorn and a beast's bellow. It turned, shielding Alara with its entire body, and its porthole lights blazed a familiar, furious crimson. It raised its right arm. The rivet gun fired. Thud hiss. The white-hot spike designed to punch through pressurized hulls didn't care about carapace armor. It struck the nearest Arbites officer square in the chest. The spike punched through the plasteel plate, the ceramite layer, the man's ribs, and the man's spine before exploding out his back and pinning him dead to the stone wall behind him. The other officers stared for a fraction of a second, their discipline momentarily broken by the sheer brutal effectiveness of the primitive weapon. That was all the time Atlas needed. It charged its limp, turning the charge into a terrifying, grinding lurch. It was a one-legged brass juggernaut. A second officer raised his suppression shield, a slab of plasteel designed to stop rioters. Atlas's drill, a blur of spinning conical metal, struck the shield. There was no contest. The drill, imbued with the strength of a mining machine and the fury of a protector, didn't just break the shield, it disintegrated it, shredding the plasteel into a cloud of black shrapnel. It continued unabated into the man behind it. His screams were mercifully short. The third officer, braver than he was, wise, dodged the drill and tried to circle, bringing his shotgun to bear on the giant's back. Atlas's free hand, the massive three-fingered claw, snapped out. It caught the man by the head. The sound of a crushing helmet and skull was a wet, final crunch. The patrol leader and the last officer, seeing the mechanical, inhuman violence, fell back, their shotguns booming. Slugs tore through hydraulic cables on Atlas's shoulder, causing dark, oily fluid to spray. Another shot glanced off its helmet, cracking one of its yellow portholes. The giant ignored the damage. Its logic was absolute. It cornered the last officer against a rusted pipeline. The man dropped his shotgun and fumbled for his shockmaul, his face a mask of terror. Atlas simply pressed him against the pipe with its free hand and fired the rivet gun at point-blank range, nailing him to the metal. The patrol leader, the last one alive, stared in disbelief. He dropped his weapon and ran his heavy boots splashing in the sludge. Atlas let him go. The immediate threat to Alara was over. It limped back to the center of the cistern, its systems thrumming, the oily fluid leaking from its shoulder. It set Alara down, who was now awake, her eyes wide, staring at the carnage. She wasn't horrified by the Arbites. She was horrified by the violence, the sheer grinding finality of it. She saw the wound on Atlas, the black ichor pulsing from a severed pipe in its shoulder, the rhythmic hiss of pressure loss. The giant's movements were becoming sluggish, its right arm slow to respond. It was wounded, and she knew instinctively that this was her fault. She had fed it, but it was still just a machine, and it was broken. She touched the leaking joint, her small fingers smearing in the thick, oily fluid. "Hurts," she whispered. Her mind reached out not with the explosive, uncontrolled rage from before, but with a focused, desperate plea. Fix. The power that had flowed into it before the raw energy now answered her call with a specific purpose. A small, shimmering blue-green aura, visible only to her, flickered around her fingertips. She pressed her hand to the severed pipe. The leaking fluid slowed. The torn metal of the pipe began to warp to heat the edges, drawing together in a crude psychic weld. Sparks flew as the immaterial energy forced the physical world to obey. The hissing stopped. The joint, though crudely patched, was sealed. Atlas's lights, which had dimmed, brightened back to a steady yellow. The giant flexed its arm, a test of the new, strange repair. It looked at Elara, its head tilting in that near-animal way, and for the first time, Elara wasn't just its charge. She was its mechanic. They were a closed system. It was her sword, and she was its forge. The dead Arbites in the cistern were a beacon, a certainty of more to come. Atlas's simple, brutal logic understood this. A compromised location was a threat to Elara. With its newly, if crudely sealed shoulder joint, the giant scooped the girl into its massive hand, her small weight insignificant, and resumed its heavy, limping march. It dragged its damaged leg with a percussive metallic scrape thud, moving away from the sounds of conflict deeper into the uncharted, forgotten underpelling of the hive. It sought a place its core programming recognized as safe, deep, dark, and defensible. After wading through canals of chest-deep, refuse-choked water, it found a new sanctuary. It was a decommissioned water treatment plant, a vast, cavernous cathedral of industry. Massive, silent turbines built in a long-forgotten, almost elegant style sat half-submerged in a great, still basin. Collapsed catwalks formed broken bridges over the dark, placid water, which was lit only by the faint, ghostly green glow of phosphorescent fungi. The air was heavy wet and still. To Elara, it was a tomb, but to Atlas its internal logic resonated. The deep water, the enclosed metal walls, the immense pressure of the hive pressing down from miles above. It felt in a way its mechanical mind could not articulate like home. It found a dry alcove, a former observation room, with a great shattered plasteel window, and set Elara down. It stood its watch at the opening, its systems settling into a low, quiet hum, its yellow lights a steady, watchful presence. This relative quiet was a new kind of poison. As Elara sat huddled her back against the cold, damp wall, her mind stretched taut by the psychic explosion, and the subsequent brutal violence was a raw, open wound. And in this universe, a wound like that does not go unanswered. At first it was just static at the edge of her hearing. Then the whispers began. They didn't come from the dark water, but from inside her head. So small, so strong. The voice was like oil on silk, a gentle, curious sound. Elara tensed her eyes, darting around the dark room. Atlas, its back to her, remained at the window, a silent brass sentinel scanning the basin. "They hurt you!" The voice cooed, slithering into her thoughts with a terrible intimacy. "They hurt your giant friend, but you stopped them. You were so powerful." Elara pressed her hands over her ears, a useless gesture. "We saw. We can make you stronger, little one. We can make it so no one ever hurts you or your protector ever again. Just let us in." As the whispers grew more insistent, the temperature in the alcove plummeted. A shadow in the corner, a place where the fungal glow did not reach, seemed to thicken. It detached itself from the wall, a shifting, intangible mass of pure, cold darkness, a minor entity of the warp, a predator of the soul drawn like a carrion fly to the beacon of her power. Elara saw it. Her breath hitched her eyes wide with a new primal terror. The thing had no shape, but she could feel its hunger. It was a spider made of cold, and it was gliding across the floor towards her. She tried to scream, but her throat was frozen. She was paralyzed. Atlas moved. The giant, which had been perfectly still, spun with a speed that defied its limp, its heavy boot smashing the stone floor. Its drill whirred to life, a deafening rising V. Its porthole lights snapped to a burning, furious crimson. It lunged not at the shadow, but in front of it. It slammed its massive brass body between Elara and the invisible predator, its armored back inches from her face, shielding her completely. It roared its mechanical, pressurized challenge into the empty air. Atlas could not see the warp. It could not perceive the psychic entity. But it saw the girl's terror. It registered the sudden, localized drop in temperature. It sensed a proximity violation by an unknown hostile. Its programming was absolute threat to Elara. Intercept. The creature of shadow, faced with a ton of enraged, supercharged brass and a screaming, immaterial shredding drill, recoiled. The shadow dissipated the presence, vanishing the whispers, cutting off with a faint, petulant hiss. Atlas stood unmoving its drill, spinning for a full minute, a brass and iron exorcist in a flooded cathedral. It slowly turned its lights, fading back to yellow, and looked down at the trembling girl. It did not understand what it had just fought. It only knew that it had won. The trap was sprung with a cold, metallic precision. The first sign was not an explosion, but a sound, the thud-thud-thud of heavy boots on the catwalks above the sudden, harsh glare of multiple searchlights cutting through the phosphorescent gloom, pinning Atlas in their crosshairs. Target acquired a Vox-amplified voice, the same one from the cistern echoed. All units converge, box it in use tangle foam. From the main entrance to the chamber, a line of black-clad Arbites enforcers advanced, their suppression shields locked together, forming a moving wall of plasteel. On the high gantries, more figures moved, setting up heavy stubbers. Atlas's lights snapped to crimson. It grabbed Elara and placed her deep within the ruined observation room, then moved its massive, limping form to block the shattered window, a brass and iron gate. But this was not just an Arbite's sweep. As the first volley of heavy stubber fire hammered into Atlas's back, a different kind of hunter revealed itself. From a side corridor, Kaelin's retinue emerged. The Null Maiden advanced first, her featureless mask, a void in the chaos, her mere presence causing Elara to gasp, a sudden cold emptiness clawing at her mind. The tech adept scuttled behind, deploying a swarm of small, spider-like drones that fanned out their red light scanners, painting the chamber. The scarred warrior, his power maul thrumming, led a small elite team, not of Arbites, but of grim-faced, storm-coated bounty hunters, their weapons specialized, their eyes fixed on the giant. "Hold the main target," Kaelin's voice crackled over their private Vox channel. "Draw its fire. The true prize is the child. Contain. Do not kill." The siege had begun. Atlas roared its rivet gun, firing, blowing one of the advancing shield-bearers off his feet. The attack came from below. As the battle raged at the chamber's entrance, the great still basin of water in the center of the room began to boil. Not from heat, but from movement. The surface erupted. Malak's cultists, the Whispering Hand, surged from the depths, clambering out of submerged outflow pipes and drainage grates. They were a horrifying spectacle, a motley, frenzied horde of mutants, their flesh warped into claws and tentacles, and heretics, their eyes burning with a zealot's fire, all armed with jagged sacrificial knives and crude makeshift pistols. They had used the warlock's scrying to bypass the Arbite's blockade, entirely traveling through the hive's drowned, forgotten veins. She is here. Malak shrieked, his own gaunt form, rising from the water like a corpse, his ritual dagger held high. The voice, "Take her for the gods, slay the unbelievers." Absolute three-dimensional chaos erupted. The disciplined Arbites caught between the mechanical giant at their front and the tide of screaming lunatics at their back faltered. Their line broke as they turned to engage the new sudden threat. The chamber became a nightmarish whirlpool of violence. Black-clad enforcers fired their shotguns into the faces of clawed mutants. The bounty hunters, realizing their payday was in jeopardy, turned their high-powered lasguns on the cultists, carving beams of blue light through the melee. Atlas, caught in the middle, became a dervish of destruction. Its programming was simple. All movement near Alara was a threat. Its drill tore through an enforcer's shield, then spun to pulverize a cultist who tried to scramble up its back. Its rivet gun fired indiscriminately, impaling both Arbites and Heretic. It was a machine, and this was its purpose. In the madness, Malak had a singular focus. He ignored the battle. He ignored the giant. He slithered through the combat, his followers dying around him, his eyes fixed on the alcove on the small girl cowering within. He saw Kaelin's Null Maiden and recoiled, a hiss escaping his lips as her psychic deadening aura washed over him. But she was focused on the giant her presence meant to dampen its link to the girl. Malak skirted her field of influence, a predator avoiding a painful trap. He climbed the wreckage to the observation room, his movements impossibly fast. He appeared in the shattered window, a dripping skeletal figure, his eyes pools of fanatical black. "Come, child," he whispered, his voice a hypnotic venom reaching a filthy hand towards Alara. "Come and be the voice that tears down the stars." Atlas roared its sensors, finally detecting the proximity breach, but it was too late. It was pinned by two bounty hunters who had managed to fire magnetic clamps onto its chassis, and its drill was still embedded in the chest of a mutant. It could not turn in time. Alara looked at the terrifying, smiling man. She looked at the raging battle. She looked at her struggling, overwhelmed protector. The whispers from the warp returned, urgent, seductive. "He will take you. Let us help. Let us burn him." She felt the rage from before, the explosive, burning power welling up. But she also remembered the molten slag, the vaporized men, the horror of her own power. She squeezed her eyes shut. No, she would not be a bomb. She would be a shield. She opened her eyes, but they were no longer the eyes of a child. They were two shimmering orbs of pure, golden white light. She raised her hand, not in anger, but in defiance. It was not an explosion. It was an emergence. A perfect, shimmering dome of golden energy snapped into existence, centered on her. It expanded in an instant, a bubble of pure psychic will. It slammed into Malak, not burning him, but throwing him. The cult leader was hurled backwards, as if hit by a solid object, his body skipping across the water like a stone before he crashed into a turbine. The shield expanded to encompass the entire observation room, its golden edge slicing through a charging mutant, shearing the creature in two. The dome stabilized, perfectly formed, sealing the alcove. Inside, Alara stood, her hand raised, her body trembling with the strain. Outside, the bubble shimmered with the light of a small sun, impervious. Far back in his mobile command unit, Inquisitor Kaelin watched the scene through the visual feed of a servo skull. He saw the firefight. He saw the unexpected, chaotic element of the cultists. He saw the giant's brutal efficacy. And then he saw the dome. He saw the girl raise her hand. He saw the perfect, controlled, stable creation of a psychic shield, a feat that would tax a trained, sanctioned Psyker. He saw an 8-year-old child wielding a power he had only read about in the most restricted texts. He felt a true cold spike of fear, a feeling he had not experienced in decades. prefect, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Fall back. All forces. Fall back. Now. He cut the channel. His grey eyes stared at the glowing golden bubble on his screen. Not Delta. He whispered to the empty room, his knuckles white. That is Alpha level. Emperor God. What is this thing? The order was a knife of cold logic in the heart of the chaos. All units withdraw. Kalen's voice, devoid of all emotion, cut through the Vox channels. Disengage. Now. In the flooded cistern, the Arbite's command squad, pinned between a drill-wielding colossus and a tide of screaming fanatics, could not believe the command. My lord, the sergeant shouted, firing his shotgun into a mutant's face. We're falling back, but the cultists are irrelevant, Kalen's voice replied. The signal already degrading as he cut the main channel. Your assignment is complete. You were the sonar. I have found what I was looking for. Save what you can. The Emperor protects. The line went dead. The Arbite's disciplined line shattered into a panicked rout. They threw smoke grenades, their heavy boots splashing as they dragged their wounded, abandoning the fight in a desperate scramble back to their fortified access points. The bounty hunters, their paymaster suddenly silent, did not need to be told twice. They vanished into the shadows, their professional detachment dissolving. The whispering hand, seeing their enemies flee, let out a ragged, triumphant roar. They had won. They had driven back the soldiers of the corpse god. Malak, coughing up oily water, staggered to his feet, his eyes fixed on the golden, shimmering dome with a new, burning, covetous hunger. Inside the shield, Ilara finally collapsed to her knees, the golden light flickering and dying, leaving the alcove in sudden, oppressive darkness. Atlas, its crimson lights fading to a dull, watchful yellow, turned and limped into the room, shielding her small, trembling body with its own. Inquisitor Kalen was not watching the retreat. He had already turned from the command hololith, leaving the baffled prefect Vol to manage the disastrous, collapsing sweep. Kalen strode from the command center, his black coat sweeping behind him. He moved through the precinct to a separate, heavily warded chamber, its plasteel door marked with the triple-barred eye of his office. Inside, the air was cold, and the only light came from a bank of humming cogitators and the soft violet glow of a psychic, baffling field. In the center of the room sat a skeletal figure, his body fused into a high-backed, cushioned throne of brass and wire. It was an astropath, his eye sockets empty, his mind a lonely beacon in the dark. Kalen stood before the telepath, his shadow falling over the enthroned man. You will send a message, Kalen said, his voice flat. Astro-telepathic cipher. Priority Alpha Prime. To the Synod of the Ordo Hereticus Segmentum Solar. The astropath's head jerked, his unseen face contorted in a mask of fear. A request of that priority to that authority was unthinkable. It meant a world was dying. My lord. The strain. The astropath whispered, his voice a dry rustle. The strain is irrelevant, Kalen said. You will send this, or this entire hive will be lost. This planet will be lost. He began to dictate, his words precise, cold, and utterly terrifying. Recipient Ordo Hereticus High Command. Subject Emergent Psyker Level Alpha Prime. Location Hive World. Sidon Fort. Status Uncontrolled, Unbound, Hostile. He paused, his grey eyes fixed on the far wall. Entity is a child approximate age 8 solar years. Has demonstrated spontaneous controlled generation of psychic shields, localized psychic annihilation, and an unnatural symbiotic bond with an unidentified non-imperial war construct. He took a breath. My own retinue is lost. The Null Maiden is confirmed neutralized. Local Arbite's forces are inadequate. This is no longer a purge. This is a harvest of the highest, most critical importance. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper, an order that was also a death sentence. I am invoking the interdiction of the tithe. I require the immediate diversion of the nearest black ship. I require 3 platoons of Inquisition stormtroopers inquisitorial issue, not local militarum. I am prepared to enact exterminatus protocols on Sidon 4 if capture fails. The potential for demonic resonance at this level is absolute. He straightened up. Send it. Send it until your mind breaks. Send it until they answer. The astropath nodded, a single tear of blood rolling from an empty socket. He began to chant, his frail body trembling as his mind reached out screaming into the hellish sea of the warp. Kalen turned and left the chamber, sealing the door behind him. He walked back to the hololith of Sidon IV, a city of billions, and stared at the pulsing red light in its depths. His obsession was now total. He would not be a surgeon. He would be the executioner, and he would sacrifice this entire world to stop the cancer he had found. The echoes of the battle faded, replaced by the distant, triumphant howls of the whispering hand and the drip, drip, drip of water in the vast, dark chamber. The immediate threat was gone, but the cost was absolute. Atlas stood in the alcove, a limping, leaking colossus. Its fight was over, but its systems were in catastrophic failure. The makeshift psychic patch on its shoulder had held, but the rest of its body was a wreck. A heavy caliber round from a bounty hunter's rifle had shattered the hydraulic housing of its good leg, making its limp 1,000 times worse. The arm that held the rivet gun was a mangled ruin. A glancing shot from a specialized thermal weapon had melted the joint, fusing the plates and severing the internal mechanisms. The arm hung uselessly, a dead weight of brass and iron. It slumped against the far wall of the observation room, a deep, shuddering groan, vibrating from its chest, the sound of a dying engine. Black, viscous hydraulic fluid, its lifeblood pulsed from a dozen smaller rents, and tears pooling at its feet. The most terrifying sign was its light. The steady, protective yellow of its helmet portholes was gone. In its place was a weak, flickering, sickly orange, a guttering candle in the oppressive dark. It tried to raise its drill arm to a defensive posture, but the limb only sparked, rising halfway before crashing down against its own chassis with a dull, hollow clang. It was dying. Elara, drained and trembling from the effort of her shield, watched in silent, rising panic. This was her only friend, her only constant in a universe of monsters. And it was shutting down. No, she whispered, her voice a tiny, lost sound. She crawled forward, pushing past her own crushing exhaustion. Don't go. You can't. She placed her small hands on its massive, armored leg. The metal was cold, its internal hum almost gone. The orange lights in the helmet flickered, dimmed, and then went out, plunging the alcove into near total darkness. A single final hiss of escaping pressure was the only reply. A desperate, primal sob tore from Elara's throat. She couldn't lose him. She was already losing herself, and he was the only thing holding her together. She pushed herself up, ignoring the anvil-like weight in her skull. She put her hands on the largest, most grievous wound, the smoking, melted ruin of its arm joint. She closed her eyes and pushed. Not the golden, defiant light of her shield. This was a raw, desperate, greedy pull. She siphoned the power from the air, from the dark water, from the very fabric of the hateful reality around her. Fix him. The whispers which had been lurking at the edges of her mind pounced. Yes, little one. A chorus of voices hissed their tone, not just seductive, but hungry. We can help. We can make him strong. We can make him new. Just let us in. The air grew impossibly cold. A different kind of power, not her own, answered her call. It was not the clean, white-hot energy of her rage. This was a dark, oily, and intelligent power. It flowed through her into the machine. The metal of the mangled joint didn't just heal, it writhed. The brass and iron flowed like molten wax, twisting and re-knitting, not as it was, but as something else. New dark slag-like metal as black as the sump water, fused with the brass forming sharp, chitinous-looking plates. The severed hydraulics were replaced with new pulsing veins of a substance that seemed to drink the light. Ilara cried out in pain and terror, pulling her hands back, but the dark energy continued to flow, her desperate plea having become an open, unclosable gate. There was a sudden violent jolt. A deep resonant thrum echoed from the giant's chest, and the helmet portholes snapped back to life. They were not yellow. They were not orange. They were a deep, baleful, hateful crimson, the same red it used for combat, but now they did not flicker. They burned with a steady, cold intensity. The machine subject Atlas pushed itself away from the wall, standing tall on its one good leg. It raised its newly healed arm. The arm was a monstrous hybrid of brass and nightmare, its fingers now elongated, sharpened and dripping with a dark psychic residue. It flexed its new dark claws, the movement impossibly fast, sharp and spidery. Ilara stared, her heart frozen. She had saved her protector, but in the process she had invited something terrible into the machine, and into herself. The whispers in her head were no longer asking. They were laughing. The machine was no longer Atlas. It was a brass and shadow iron thing, its crimson burning eyes fixed on the small girl cowering in the alcove. Ilara scrambled back, terror choking her, as the giant rose to its full, terrible height. The new dark energy that had knitted its arm back together now coursed through its entire chassis, a raw, unnatural power. Its damaged leg was still broken, the joint still fused, but the machine no longer cared. It moved with a new, lurching, nightmarish strength, dragging its useless limb with a scraping, rhythmic thud. Scrap! A sound that hammered at her nerves. Its new clawed hand flexed, the black talons clicking. It turned its movements jerky and spidery, and its massive hand shot out, grabbing Ilara around the waist. She screamed. This was not the gentle, cradling grip of her protector. This was the grip of a jailer, hard and absolute. It lifted her from the ground and clamped her to its chest. Its directive was the same: protect the sister. But the dark energy now twisting its logic had a new interpretation. Secure the asset. Permit no escape. Suffer no rivals. It began to move, smashing its way out of the treatment plant. It was not fleeing. It was advancing. It was a juggernaut of corrupted brass, its crimson lights cutting a hateful path through the darkness. It was drawn not by logic, but by a deep, resonant psychic echo, a place of power and despair deep in the sump's foundations. It punched through a collapsed, rebar-choked tunnel, the metal and stone crumbling before its assault. Ilara was a rag doll, thrown and battered, with every lurching, powerful step, her small fists beating uselessly against the cold, unfeeling metal. She was no longer its ward, she was its prisoner. The laughing whispers in her head had grown silent, as if they too were watching with hushed anticipation. After what felt like an eternity of lurching, violent movement, the giant stopped. It was before a vast arched bulkhead sealed with a dozen rust-fused locking wheels. The wall was marked with a symbol Ilara did not recognize, a winged skull, ancient and majestic. The machine, sensing its destination, did not bother with the wheels. It braced itself and slammed its drill arm against the center of the vault door. The sound was a deafening metallic gong that echoed through the water. It drilled again and again, the metal screaming, until the ancient lock mechanism shattered. With a groan of tortured metal, the massive doors split apart, revealing the cavern beyond. It was a cathedral, a true ancient imperial sanctum built by the Hive's founders and long ago lost to the sump, swallowed by the rising toxic waters. It was a vast, cavernous space, its vaulted ceiling lost in an oppressive darkness far above. Great shattered stained glass windows, depicting long dead saints and forgotten imperial victories, loomed like the broken eyes of giants. Below, a vast, flooded nave held the black, still water, with only the tops of stone pews jutting out like a row of broken teeth. In the center, a colossal 50-foot-wide imperial aquila carved from granite had fallen from the ceiling, creating a bridge to a raised circular dais at the far end, the high altar. It was a place of profound silence, a waterlogged tomb. It was a perfect 40K analog of rapture, a grand failed dream now drowned in its own filth. Atlas lurched forward, its boots sending deep, sucking splashes echoing through the silence. It crossed the broken aquila, its metal talons scraping on the holy symbol, and climbed onto the altar, the only large, dry space in the chamber. It threw Elara onto the cold, cracked marble stone, its new, clawed hand releasing her. She scrambled away, crab-walking backwards, until she hit the base of a towering, headless statue of a long-forgotten saint. She was trapped. Her protector, her only friend, was now her terrifying, crimson-eyed warden. She pulled her knees to her chest and wept, her small sobs lost in the immense, cavernous dark. The calm before the storm was a terrible new kind of quiet. Elara, exhausted beyond tears, eventually fell into a fitful, nightmare-ridden sleep, her cheek pressed against the cold, damp stone of the altar. But the machine did not rest. It did not power down. It stood at the edge of the dais, its back to her, a sentinel facing the flooded entrance. Its crimson lights, a beacon of malevolent power, swept back and forth, painting the drowned saints in momentary, bloody light. The new corrupted arm, the one of black iron claws, flexed and twitched with a life of its own. And its other arm, the familiar drill, was no longer still. It spun slowly, constantly, its motor emitting a low, unbroken whirr, a sound of promise, of hunger, of violence yet to come. The sacred silence of the drowned cathedral was a lie, a temporary stillness before the final violation. Outside the shattered vault doors, in the miles of flooded tunnels, a new sound began. It was not the clumsy, panicked splashing of the Arbites. It was the measured, disciplined thud, thud, thud of heavy, synchronized boots, the sound of professionals at work. Inquisition stormtroopers, their carapace armor painted a deep, non-reflective black, moved through the sump water with a chilling, practiced ease. Their weapons were not the crude stubbers of the hive. They carried sleek, compact, hot-shot laser guns, their power packs glowing with a contained blue-white energy, their heavy webbing loaded with specialized munitions, melter charges for the construct, and SI dampener grenades for the child. They formed a perfect silent perimeter around the cathedral's entrance, their weapons trained on the darkness within their helmet visors, glowing a dull, predatory red. Inquisitor Kylan arrived behind them, a black-coated shark moving through his own deadly tide. He was flanked by a new retinue grim-faced warriors in identical black armor, their weapons larger, their expressions harder. The astropath who had sent the message was now a broken-willed, drooling husk, but he had succeeded. Kylan had his army. The target is inside his voice, now carried by a secure, encrypted vox, was a precise scalpel of sound unheard by his prey. The alpha-level Psyker is the primary asset. The construct is designated Aberration Xeno, secondary to be neutralized. A team of tech adepts, their red robes stained with sump filth, began assembling a heavy tripod-mounted device, a large-scale null field generator. With a low, nauseating VRUM, it activated a wave of psychic silence pulsing into the cathedral, a deadening, soul-crushing field designed to poison the very air the Psyker breathed. First squad establish breach, second squad containment, target is the altar, advance. But Kylan was not the only hunter drawing his net. In a separate lightless cistern, not half a kilometer from the cathedral, Malak was screaming in a cold fury. His few remaining scouts, his lesser hands, had reported the arrival of the black-armored soldiers. The Inquisitor, the man of cold iron and unbelief, was here to steal his prize, to cage his new god. He would chain it, Malak shrieked, his voice echoing over the diseased water, his skeletal form trembling. He would hand our salvation over to his masters to be drugged, broken, and fed to the corpse god. His remaining followers, a ragged, fanatical mass of perhaps 30 souls, chanted with him, their eyes wide with martyrdom. The unbeliever brings his soldiers of iron, Malak cried, his charisma a burning, feverish brand. We cannot fight his guns, so we will fight him with faith. He raised his ritual dagger, its edge still stained with the warlock's blood. The Inquisitor brings his soldiers. We will bring a god. He turned to his most loyal, his inner circle of scarred heretics and weeping mutants, their faces masks of ecstatic devotion. The ritual requires a great sacrifice. A great door requires a great key. Your lives, your souls, give them to the hand, and you will become the hinges on the very door of our liberation. A frenzied, joyous roar was his only answer. They did not hesitate. They jostled, pushing each other, fighting for the honor of being the first. Malak began the chant, a horrifying multilingual invocation that clawed at the fabric of reality itself. He plunged his dagger into the chest of his closest lieutenant, who met the blade with a rapturous smile, his lifeblood spilling into the sump. One by one, the cultists offered their throats, their hearts, their very lives, their blood turning the black water of the cistern into a churning crimson vortex. The air grew thick, the pressure dropping, and a new, terrible, sentient light began to glow in the depths. Malak cackled, his arms raised high, a conduit for the abomination he was about to unleash upon his enemies. The first shot was not a bullet, but a wave of profound psychic nothing. The null field generator spooled up to full power, saturated the cathedral. For Ilara, it was agony. The very air turned to grinding glass in her mind. The whispers vanished, and the dark power she had used to heal her protector was choked off, leaving her feeling small, cold, and horrifyingly sober. The effect on Atlas was the opposite. The dark, demonic energy that had corrupted its systems was not dampened. It was enraged. It was like throwing water on a chemical fire. The machine, which had been standing a silent, crimson-eyed vigil, convulsed. A deafening mechanical shriek, a sound of pure, pressurized hate, tore from its vents. The crimson lights in its helmet blazed with the intensity of furnaces. Engage, Kalen's voice snapped over the stormtrooper's vox. The black-armored soldiers advanced, moving in two perfect, disciplined fire teams, their hot-shot las beams cutting the darkness, lancing bright blue explosive impacts across the giant's chassis. They moved with terrifying efficiency, one team laying down a blistering field of suppressing fire, while the other bounded forward, splashing through the shallows of the flooded nave, their goal the altar. The shots superheated lances of energy hurt. They superheated the brass plating, boiling the sump water where they struck, and one found a seam vaporizing the hydraulic fluid in its good leg. But the machine was no longer a machine. It was a vessel for a raw, dark power. It roared a sound that was no longer its own and charged. It didn't limp. It threw itself from the dais, its broken leg forgotten, a 2-ton missile of brass and malice. It landed in the deep water of the nave with a catastrophic splash, a tidal wave of black water erupting, and was instantly upon the first fire team. A stormtrooper, his training screaming at him, raised his hotshot lasgun only for the new black iron claw to catch him by the throat. The giant lifted him armor and all clear of the water and squeezed. The sound of crushing plasteel and bone was sickeningly audible. It threw the broken, wet corpse aside like trash. This was not a battle. It was a butchering. Atlas was no longer a big daddy. It was a nightmare. Its drill, a constant high-pitched VRE, he went to work. It cored a soldier through his reinforced breastplate, lifted him into the air, and used his still firing-in death spasm body as a shield against the other team's fire. The black iron claws were faster, a spider-like blur, slashing, tearing, and ripping. It plunged its arm into the deep water, and yanked a submerged trooper up its talons, puncturing the man's rebreather, and held him as he drowned its crimson eyes watching the bubbles. The stormtroopers were professionals, the best of the best, but they were trained to fight men, mutants, and xenos. This was something else. This was a force of nature from a dead world fueled by a power from a hellish dimension. Melter teams forward, the stormtrooper sergeant bellowed, firing his hell pistol at its face. Breach the chassis now. The battle was a swirling, churning vortex of water-lass fire and shredded metal. A trooper braver than wise got close enough to attach a melter charge to its back. Atlas spun its drill arm, catching him in the torso, and the man was simply gone, reduced to a red mist. The giant tore the beeping charge from its own back and threw it the explosive, detonating in the air, vaporizing a stone pew. It was a one-machine whirlwind of death, its corrupted, single-minded purpose absolute. No one touches the sister. It was pushing the elite soldiers back, its brass hide now blackened, scorched, and running with hydraulic fluid, but its crimson eyes burned with an undiminished, unholy light. And then a new sound entered the cathedral, a sound that was not a sound. It was a chord played on nerves of silk and glass, a note of perfect, agonizing bliss. In the cistern, half a kilometer away, Malak had finished his great work. The water in the center of the nave, far from the battle, began to move. It did not boil, it curdled. The fabric of reality, already thin, tore. The air ripped open, not with the bile green of a warp rift, but with a shimmering, impossible, beautiful tear of violet and rose gold. A scent of ozone and forgotten perfume, thick and cloying, washed through the chamber, overpowering the stench of the sump. From the tear, a single perfect golden claw emerged. Then another. A being of impossible slender grace and horrifying beauty pulled itself from the breach, stepping delicately onto the surface of the black water, which did not ripple. It was a demon of Slanesh. It was tall, impossibly thin, its skin a flawless pearlescent white. It had too many arms, each ending in a pincer of gold, and its face was a mask of serene, ecstatic, androgynous perfection. It ignored the battle. It ignored the soldiers. Its head crowned with a single spiraling horn turned. Its perfect violet eyes, pupils like galaxies, found Elara cowering on the altar. It smiled a slow, unfolding smile that promised 1 billion years of perfect, exquisite torture. The new song. It whispered its voice, a melody that caused blood to weep from the ears of the nearest troopers. It took a single graceful step towards the altar. The effect on Atlas was instantaneous. Its rage, its corruption, its battle lust, all vanished, overridden by a single final, absolute protocol. The demon, this thing was moving towards Elara. The crimson lights in its helmet flickered, and for a fraction of a second returned to a pure, bright, protective yellow. Its corrupted logic and its core programming were for one terrible instant in perfect agreement. Threat. Level absolute. Intercept. It dropped the mangled corpse of a stormtrooper. It ignored the lass fire peppering its hide. It turned its massive broken body and charged the demon. No, it roared, and for the first time a word, a single clear, rusted word, spoken in a dead man's voice, tore from its vents. Mine. It was the bravest, most futile act in the galaxy. The giant machine, a ton of brass iron and rage, slammed into the demon. The demon did not flinch. It simply raised one of its many golden-clawed hands. The impact was silent. The demon's claws, impossibly sharp, moved in a blur, not with force, but with a horrifying surgical grace. They didn't punch the metal, they undid it. They sliced through the pressurized brass alloy suit as if it were wet paper. The drill arm was severed, spinning away to splash uselessly in the water. The new corrupted claw arm was cut into a dozen pieces in a microsecond. A single perfect golden hand, its talons sharper than thought, plunged deep into the giant's chest through the reinforced plating and tore the power core out, a mess of wires and hissing, sparking machinery. Subject Atlas froze. The giant, the protector, the monster stopped. It hung impaled on the demon's arm, its own limbs now useless dead weights. It slowly tilted its massive helmet, its head, turning its one remaining cracked porthole light, a faint, flickering, dying yellow, managing to find Ilara on the altar. It made a sound, a final wet pneumatic hiss, a last pressurized sigh. Then the light died. The demon, its face a mask of bored, beautiful contempt, pulled its arm free and let the carcass drop. The brass and iron shell its purpose served its life, extinguished, crashed into the water at the foot of the altar, a dead, empty thing, and began to sink, a final trail of bubbles rising to the surface. Atlas was dead. The cathedral was silent. The only sound was the hiss of steam where the demon had been, and the soft tink. Tink. Tink of molten metal dripping from the dead stormtroopers. Ilara stood on the altar, her small body the epicenter of a blinding, white-hot psychic sun. She had watched her protector, her only anchor, be undone. She had watched his last dying yellow light wink out. The grief, the rage, and the sheer, unadulterated power of the warp she had held at bay all crashed into the vacuum of his death. She had screamed, but it was not a child's scream. It was the sound of a star being born. The surviving stormtroopers, their discipline absolute, had already been moving. Asset is hostile, capture, capture. The sergeant's voice had cracked over the vox even as the demon advanced. Kalen, from his high gantry, his face a mask of cold, obsessive fury, had raised his bolt pistol. Fire on the demon, contain the child, she will be taken. The black-armored soldiers were caught between two gods, their duty forcing them forward. The demon, its perfect face alight with a new, hungry, ecstatic joy, ignored the soldiers and glided towards the altar, its golden claws outstretched. Yes, little song, it whispered its voice, a melody that broke bones. Sing for me. She was trapped. A prize for the Inquisitor. A toy for the demon. Ilara stopped screaming. The tears evaporated from her face in a hiss of steam. She stood up, her small back straight. She looked at the advancing black-clad soldiers. She looked at the beautiful, terrifying monster that had murdered her friend. She had tried to be a shield. She had tried to be a battery. She had tried to be a child. All of it had failed. All that was left was the power. She opened her eyes. They were not the eyes of a child. They were not human. They were two burning, bottomless pits of pure, white-hot psychic energy. They were open gates, and she was the gatekeeper. She looked at Kalen. She looked at the demon. And she chose herself. No, the word was not spoken. It was a psychic fact impressed upon the universe. She didn't raise her hands. She simply was. A sun of pure, unbound psychic energy detonated from her small frame. It was not a wave. It was an event. The light was absolute. The demon of Slaanesh, an entity of pure emotional chaos, shrieked. This raw, focused human reality, this grief was anathema. The white light struck it, and its beautiful pearlescent skin blackened and burned. Its golden claws melted. It was not a battle. It was an erasure. With a final, agonizing, multi-toned wail, the demon was not just banished, it was scoured, hurled back into the warp, in tattered, screaming pieces. Malak, who had crawled onto the fallen Aquila to witness his god's arrival, had only a second to register his profound theological error before the light touched him. He did not scream. He did not burn. He was simply unmade, reduced to a cloud of fine gray ash that scattered on the water. The stormtroopers caught in the expanding nova were flash incinerated. Their black armor, in a single terrible moment, glowed bright, white-hot. The men inside turned to steam and ash before the armor itself melted and clattered to the ground in molten, smoking heaps. Far above, Inquisitor Kalen, seeing the cataclysm, slammed his hand onto a rosette on his belt. A dark, crackling energy shield flared to life, just as the white-hot wave of pure reality hit him. The shield held, but the feedback was catastrophic. Kalen was thrown backwards, his body convulsing his armor, smoking his nervous system on fire, and he crashed into the far bulkhead, gravely wounded, his shield shattered, and finally mercifully unconscious. The silence was absolute. It was heavier than the water, more oppressive than the miles of city pressing down from above. The psychic sun had set, leaving a profound, ringing emptiness in its wake. The drowned cathedral was a ruin, its pillars cracked, its remaining statues toppled. The only light came from the still smoldering molten slag heaps that had been Inquisition stormtroopers. Wisps of steam rose from the black, oily water, which was now littered with ash, and the dark, unidentifiable residue of a banished demon. In the center of the altar, Elara stood a small, solitary figure in a vast graveyard of her own making. The power had receded, leaving her hollow empty and crushingly, terrifyingly alone. She had won. She walked her small, bare feet unsteady on the cracked marble to the edge of the dais. The water below was dark and still. She looked down, her own small, tear-streaked face reflected in its surface. And beneath that reflection she saw him. The remains of Subject Atlas. The great brass and iron husk lay on the cathedral floor, half buried in the silt, a forgotten, broken toy. He was just metal, just a machine. But he had been her machine. She knelt, ignoring the water that lapped at her rags, and reached down her small fingers, stretching, just managing to brush the top of the cracked, dead yellow porthole of his helmet. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice a tiny, raw sound in the immense dead chamber. "Mr. Bubbles." The name, a forgotten memory, a ghost from another world, was her final, heartbreaking goodbye. The power she had used, the cataclysm she had unleashed, had not gone unnoticed. It was a wound in the universe, and the universe was already beginning to scar over, a scrape of metal on stone. Elara's head snapped up. From a pile of rubble on the high gantry, a shadow detached itself. It was a figure of profound, agonizing effort. Inquisitor Kalen, his black coat shredded, one half of his body a raw, weeping burn, dragged himself forward. His augmetic eye was a sparking ruin. He had lost his retinue, his army, his mission, but not his conviction. He raised his bolt pistol, his hand shaking with a spasm of agony, and aimed it down at the small girl. "Witch!" He spat, his voice a ruined, bloody rasp. "Abomination! You will not escape." Before his trembling finger could pull the trigger, a new voice, cold and vast and heavy as a mountain, filled the chamber. Enough. The air, already cold, plummeted to an arctic chill. The space between Kalen and the altar tore, not with the violet light of the demon, but with a clean, sharp, silver-blue energy. Three figures, colossal and majestic, stepped out of reality itself. They were not men. They were giants clad in archaic, unadorned, storm-grey Terminator armor, their pauldrons marked with a book and a sword. Their eyes were glowing blue-white lenses, and in their hands they held weapons that hummed with a terrible, contained power. Grey knights. One of the giants, his helmet emblazoned with a single crimson-red cross, did not even look at Elara. He turned his massive, sculpted helm towards the wounded Inquisitor on the gantry. "You were ordered to contain Kalen." The Grey Knight's voice boomed, a vox-amplified perfect basso profundo. "You were ordered to assess. You failed. You have compromised this entire world." The knight did not raise his weapon. He simply watched. Kalen, his face a mask of disbelief and new dawning horror, tried to speak, but no words came. His failure was absolute. The second knight, a Justicar carrying a towering halberd, stepped forward. His gaze fell upon the molten slag of the stormtroopers, the faint sulphurous stain of the demon, and finally upon the small child standing by the water. He took a heavy, measured step onto the altar. The marble did not crack, but the world seemed to hold its breath. He was a being of pure, unadulterated, fanatical purpose. He was not here to save her. He was not here to kill her. He was here to collect. The Justica knelt. The sound of his armor joints, a high-tech, perfect pneumatic hiss, was deafening in the silence. He was still a mountain of iron, even on one knee. He looked at Alara, his blue-lensed eyes seeming to see straight through her, into the raw, scarred, powerful vortex of her soul. Child, his voice was not unkind. It was not kind. It was simply final. Your life as you knew it is over. Your grief is a luxury you cannot afford. Your power is a curse you will bear for others. Your fate is no longer your own. He rose, a shadow blocking out the faint phosphorescent glow. He held out his massive, gauntleted hand, not in comfort, but in command. Alara hollowed out with nothing left to fight for, nowhere left to run, slowly, mechanically put her small, filth-covered hand into the giant's metal palm. The last scene of Sadon 4 was not an explosion. It was a quiet, terrible acceptance. Alara was led away by the grey-armored giants, their teleport beacon already humming. As she was guided into the shimmering blue-silver light, she looked back one last time. She saw the dark, still water of the cathedral and the faint, cracked yellow eye of her protector, Subject Atlas, as he sank finally and forever into the cold, silent, indifferent mud of the sump. She had been saved from the darkness, only to be claimed by the cold, iron, unblinking light of the Imperium. Her journey to the black ships and the long, dark, terrible sacrifice on Terra had just begun.